So I'm very happy to Attarde Foundation, especially happy to host this event on the various brain series. We have been, Attarde Foundation is engaged for last 1 year on various sessions, primarily in the web-based sessions. Because of the COVID, a lot of in-person activities have shut down or closed down. But in the last 1.5 years, we did some of the actual physical activities. Attarde Foundation one is in the donation of food to some of the needy people when everything was shut down last year in the United States, and we this year sent 35 machines to India, including ventilators and oxygen concentrators to support the system. We have been conducting some of the sessions and trained almost like a 400 plus people in US, Canada, and also a few people in India on yoga in last 1.5 years, and then conducted few webinar. One of our past speaker, Dr. Chopde, spoke on last time on genetics, and I thought I reached out to Amit, and for that I am very thankful for Dr. Amit for accepting the request to discuss or explain the most complex organ in our body, brain. Amit, I will give little quick in short brief background or bio of Dr. Amit, which is his bio is like a 6-7 pages, but I can't read all that, but I'll read out little brief about him. Amit Chaudhari, he is MD, Ph.D. In neurology, and now for doing his fellowship at University of California. And then he would be one of the very very few people in the United States who I can definitely make this statement that in few years doing a brain surgery or being a super master in a neurology and neuroscientist. To talk about Amit, little brief is he is currently the chief neurology resident at University of California. He's currently pursuing fellowship, and he has several additional certifications. His publications, abstracts, and presentations has been made in several magazines and several journals, like for example, British Medical Journal Neurology, Willy Clinical Case Reports, and there are several. It's a big list here. His dissertations have been presented. Probably I have here like a 6 pages his biodata where his presentation has been made. Amit, the best thing about Amit is there is a right combination, not only from medical science perspective, but medical science plus spiritualism and the technology. So I think is a right mix that is required, which is the need of the time, for all of us. And I would request now Amit to enlighten us a little bit about this most complex topic. Thanks again. And you have selected 3 different subjects. Today's subject is what happens between life and death. The next Sunday, which is September 19th, again, same time, the second series will be mask, vaccines, and the human brain. And the third subject on September 26th is becoming digitally immortal by 2045. So please do not miss any of these topics. These are like some of the topics you won't be able to get this knowledge, in future again. And now I wanted to invite Amit to, begin our start explaining this session.
Thank you so much. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Hopefully it shares the right one. Do you see the presentation, or do you see my desktop? I can't really see what.
Yeah, we can see this presentation.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you so much for the amazing introduction, everything you said. I have known Pramod Uncle and Sunita Auntie for so long, and they have always been a huge inspiration to me and our whole family. So it's such an honor just to be invited by them here today. And I'm a little nervous, so I may talk fast or talk slow or, forget some things, but please forgive me for that. So anyway, I want to talk to you today on the question of what is between life and death. This talk is part one of a three-part series on brain functions by the Attarde Foundation. And I hope you are able to join all three. And to learn more about the series or the Attarde Foundation, you can visit attardefoundation.org. And to learn more about me, you can visit amitchaudharymd.com. I am also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as @AmitChaudharyMD. And I hope you'll be able to connect with me in all of these platforms. So before we get started, this Zoom format is unfortunately not as interactive because the microphones and camera shifts tend to get in the way of a good conversation. So just before we begin, I just have a small request that you please keep your microphone off for the entire duration of the talk, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So if any questions do come to mind, please remember them or write them down, and we can discuss them later. Okay, so to start, I have some bad news. Right? You're going to die. Look around you. Your wife, your son, your husband, your mother, your pet, everyone is going to die. We all know this, but we think it's going to happen to everyone except for us. Someone once said, the most fascinating thing about human beings is their knowledge that everything must come to an end, but their ignorance in believing that death will affect all except me. That death will affect all except for me. Well, here's your reminder. You are going to die. There's a famous YouTube person, I don't know if you heard of him. His name is Sadhguru. Some of you may listen to him as well. And he once said, to ignore the mortality of man is ignorance. To ignore the mortality of man is ignorance. It is ignorance, but if you reflect on it, this ignorance is also the very thing that makes our species survive. We build cultures and arts and iPhones and theme parks and restaurants and so on and so forth. We all strive for a legacy, even though we know that we will never be around to see it. All of this would not be possible if we just sat around constantly thinking about our deaths. But it is possible because we are very much alive. Yes, you're going to die, but right now, this moment, this breath, you are alive. Try this. Take a deep breath with me. Let go of all the air. Simply breathe in and breathe out. Did you feel it? Did you feel the breath? Then you are alive. You see, you have to feel it. Merely breathing is not enough. Even the cockroach can breathe, right? But I'm not talking about that life. Life in this talk refers to intelligent life, emotional life, conscious life. There's a famous quote, many people are alive, but don't touch the miracle of being alive, by Thich Nhat Hanh. Many people are alive, but don't touch the miracle of being alive. I remember once I was reading about a Japanese girl. Her name was Aya Kido. She was beautiful. She was popular in school and exceptionally talented with her words. At age 15, she was diagnosed with spinocerebellar ataxia. Slowly, day by day, she lost her ability to walk to talk, to do anything, until she just lay in bed waiting for her life to end. But before dying, she published a book called 1 Liter of Tears. And in it, she wrote, "Just being alive is such a lovely and wonderful thing. Just being alive is such a lovely and wonderful thing." Her body had failed her. She had to feed with a tube. She had to lay in feces until somebody cleaned her. And yet, just being alive is such a lovely and wonderful thing. It really makes us question, who exactly is alive? Imagine if I take an axe and I chop your arm off. Is that arm alive? But it was alive just a few seconds ago, right? When it was just attached to you. What about your liver, your kidney, your spleen, your fingernail? How about your heart? Almost all ancient cultures believed you were alive as long as your heart was beating. But today, lots of people are walking around with fake heart machines or even heart transplants. They don't have their own heartbeat. Are they not alive? You see, all these things, they just keep you alive. But who is the you? Who is alive? Cognito ergo sum, right? I think, therefore I am. This phrase was said by the philosopher René Descartes in 1644. 1644, and we're still quoting him. This idea that I think, therefore I am, has dominated our scientific and philosophical thought for more than 350 years. I think, therefore I am. But there is a fault with it. And you all know this in your hearts. You all know this already. Because what happens when you go to sleep? Not the dreams and nightmares, not the lively adventures that we think about, but deep sleep. When all there is quiet. There are no thoughts. There is nothing. Do you die every night and come alive in the morning? The coma is fascinating. Right? The word itself was translated into modern Latin in the 17th century from the Greek word coma, meaning deep sleep. Some people, because of some illness, go into a coma. Sometimes we put normal, healthy people into a coma. Do you know that with a simple IV and just 2 medications, I can send you into a coma for as long as I want? And I can pull you back to life whenever I choose. We actually routinely do this in our ICUs and surgeries. But what does the person feel? What does he or she experience in that state? If you ask them, many just don't remember. They say it's just like deep sleep. But some say they felt confused. Some say they saw visions. Some hear voices. Some become aware of their own existence. Al Zena Bennett, a best-selling author of over 30 books, described his experience like this. The coma carried me into a world where time and space seemed to vanish. It was a dreamlike existence where people, places, and situations shifted as quickly as thoughts. I had a profound sense of being at a crossroads, a turning point, somewhere between death and life. A world where time and space seemed to vanish, somewhere between death and life. And that is essentially the topic of today's talk. So here you see the latest and greatest in medical technology, the fMRI, or the functional MRI scan. This machine actually measures your thoughts in real time as you are thinking them. And whether you believe this is possible or whatever feelings you have about it or not, we now have definite, concrete evidence that everything, all experiences, all beliefs, all conscious life comes from the cells inside your little brain. I'd like to share a quote with you from a man that I admire, and indeed one that our entire medical, scientific, and philosophical community looks up to, none other than Hippocrates. 2,000 years ago, Hippocrates wrote, "And men should know that from nothing else but the brain came joys, delights, laughter, and jests, and sorrows, griefs, despondency, and lamentations. And by this, in an especial manner, we acquire wisdom and knowledge, and see, and hear, and know what are foul, and what are fair, and what are sweet, and what unsavory. From nothing else but from the brain." It took 2,000 years, but the fMRI is proof of his words. Every time you see a picture, or smell your favorite food, or fall in love, or have sex, or do anything, there is a distinct signal that can be captured from inside your brain. Look at this image. On the right, you will see the fully conscious state. This is your brain right now. Red is areas of very high activity, where thousands of gigabytes of information are processed by your neurons at an alarming speed of 1 billion calculations per second. It would take the world's fastest supercomputer, called the Japanese K computer, 40 minutes to do the same amount of work that the brain does in 1 second. 40 minutes to do that amount of work the brain does in just 1 second. In the middle, what you see is the minimally conscious state. All the areas of red are gone, and the brain appears mostly green. This is deep sleep, or anesthesia, or drugs, or other states when you're not fully conscious, like meditation, for example. And then on the left, there's the vegetative state. The vegetative state is a medical term for persistent coma. People who have spent months or even years of their life in a coma have this pattern of activity. You can see that there is barely anything there. There's barely any activity, but there is something. There is something there. You are experiencing something. You're not dead. This, right here, this is where I thrive. I always say that there is life, there is death, And then there is the neurocritical care unit. When someone is sick, I mean really, really sick, I get called from the emergency room. Within minutes, our whole team is starting IVs, putting catheters, getting EKGs, getting CT scans, starting medications, and on and on and on. Every single machine you see here, every single screen, every single line is doing something vital, something that your body just does naturally without even you thinking. It's like putting together a symphony between life and death. Everything must work perfectly. Sometimes we are successful, and we celebrate wholeheartedly as our patients walk out of the ICU. And sometimes we hold the hands of families and cry with them as their loved ones pass on to the next world. But it's what happens in between that's the most exciting. So, what happens between life and death? Today, you go to any bookstore and you'll find a sizable section on NDEs, or near-death experiences. And curiously, almost every person who undergoes these experiences and comes back alive describes some sort of floating and white light. Why is this experience similar? Regardless of your religion, or whether you believed in God or reincarnation or science, or whether you spent your whole life praying or spreading terror, everyone seems to start out with this same experience. Why? This used to be the realm of philosophy. With new advances in medicine and technology, questions like what's between life and death are now making their way into the prominent peer-reviewed journals of psychology and psychiatry. Of course, those who know me know that I believe that philosophy, psychology, and even psychiatry all exist only so long as physics and neuroscience are still investigating. And we have done some investigating. In the 200 years between 1784 to 1984, there were a total of 70,000 scientific articles published about near-death experiences in 200 years. In the last 20 years alone, there were more than 674,000. We are closer than ever to answering the question of what happens between life and death, and with it, to answering all related questions about spirits, heaven, hell, reincarnation, and yes, even about God. I hope this talk has inspired you to ask more questions, because that's the whole point. I don't know what's between life and death, but I hope I've convinced you that there is most definitely something there. There is life, there is death, and there is the neurocritical care unit. When a person is in my neuro ICU, there is something happening. What's happening? And how can we find out? I realize I'm talking to a group of philanthropists, you all do great things in being part of the Attarde Foundation. So when I was preparing this talk, I couldn't help but think to myself, what would I do if I had $10 million? I don't think I could feed a village, or deliver oxygen supplies, or stop a war. But I could build a center that changes how we think about life and death. A center that uses science, mathematics, and physics to understand our biological and spiritual existence. Why? Why this question? Why this struggle? Why this legacy? Because in it, I see a potential to unlock the answers to our deepest questions of who we are, where we belong, and why we are here. I see the potential to be free from our biological bodies that will inevitably move towards failure. By creating a center that investigates what's between life and death, I see the potential to be free from our endless cycle of going through both over and over and over again. The end of karma, the end of ignorance, a true liberation. I see in this work the potential to end all human suffering forever. Thousands of years ago, the Buddha laid down his first noble truth. There is suffering, he said. But he also said, there is a way out of suffering. There is a way out of suffering, permanently, forever. The Buddha became the Buddha later, after finding that way out. But it was through his very human brain that he found that way. In deep meditation, he quieted his brain activity to the point where he actually found the way out. What did he see? What did he feel? What was in that state between life and death that inspired him to change the whole world? I believe that we can find out. If one brain can do it, there must be a way for others, even for yours. The question is how, but that's a small question. It's one that we can conquer together. Because once you believe it's possible, you can make it happen. As Simon Sinek says, once you believe in the why, the what and the how will come. Once you believe it's possible to find out what's between life and death, we can figure out how to do it, no problem. So that's it. That's all I have to say. With that, I really want to thank the Attarde Foundation for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. I am so inspired by the work you guys do every day and how much you give selflessly for others. Your donations to charity and your service to our community are truly, truly commendable. Thank you so much for having me here. And just a reminder that if anyone does want to connect with me, I'm usually pretty good about checking Twitter or Instagram. And I would absolutely love to hear what you thought about today's talk. So thank you very much. And I'll give the microphone back to Pramod Ankor.
Thanks, Amit. This is you brought up absolutely a topic which is everyone is interested in understanding. And now we can open the session for question and answers in case if some of them are, if one of them is interesting, like especially I would say Dr. Chopde There are a couple of doctors here who would be interested maybe in having any questions on this topic. I have one question, but I would say I just wanted to open it for the group.
Yes, Pramod.
Yeah, we just now opened the session because Amit thought that having the more interactive would be much better rather than just explaining. Maybe we can go more technical on the next session to go more in deep dive, but that technical sometimes may not be, people may not understand or may not like it. So, but you guys are from same profession. So if you would like to bring up some important points to talk or ask or discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Amit, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Yes, Amit. So first of all, I would like to see you on the screen if you can come. It was a fabulous talk. Okay, it was really great. And yeah, so
Thank
you
you.
touched both the scientific and the spiritual aspects of near-death experiences and what is there between life and death. One question that is coming to my mind, like you very well explained about the Buddha's process and spirituality related things and the scientific neuroscientific experimentation. Like our spiritual masters, they have been talking about deep meditation or what we call as samadhi. And the ultimate samadhi or the deep meditation is where you can't express or you can explain what happens. So like it is Sabija Samadhi and Nirvija Samadhi. Ultimate Samadhi is said to be Nirvija Samadhi, right? And in that Nirvija Samadhi, the person who goes in that and comes back, he can't explain what happened. So all the experiences that we have been getting through the research papers where people have explained something in the form of what they recollect, like the flashes or the lights and the dark and the floating experiences. So they were there in the, you can say the Sabija Samadhi or the superficial form of, you can say the deep sleep where memory still is there. So is there any evidence related to this, like in the sense of brain functioning or you can say the specific Nirbija Samadhi happening? What happens to the brain? Is there any kind of scientific evidence?
Can you mute someone?
I hope I'm clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing up that topic. You know, it's always when you talk about this, you're limited, right? You're limited by your human mind, and your ability to explain is only as good as your language and your ability to communicate with somebody else. But I think what you're trying to say is that there is a feeling that people can feel or experience that may not translate itself well into the English language or any language that you talk about, or even be able to explain in a non-verbal kind of way. And I would say that that's the whole point that we're trying to achieve. As neuroscientists, I'm not interested in what you have to say. I really don't even, most of the patients don't, that's not where we're getting our data. When patients come out of these experiences, they barely can tell us anything. For example, I'll give you a very simple example. Can you tell me exactly how your heart beats? And for most people, they can't. They don't know the channels and the arteries and the veins and circulation. Most people don't even remember their heart beats 24 hours a day, every single minute, about 60 times a minute. But it still happens. And there is the aspect is, with technology, you can measure it, you can see it, you can make it sure that it's happening. Is it happening? How it's happening? And so the real exciting part is using the fMRIs, using other modalities that we have when people go into that state, and extracting what they're experiencing without them having to tell us. So even if they say that they can't communicate, they don't know how to explain it, or they don't understand what they saw, you have evidence of what they saw on the screen, on the image, on their technology that you have. You know, one famous experiment that maybe some of you have heard of is where people put these machines on other people as they were sleeping, and they connected it to a projector. And all of a sudden, you can see what the person is dreaming about on the screen, like watching a movie. Now, this movie, of course, not very clear. It's like watching, you know, a television from the 1910s or something, but we're getting there. So if we can find out what's happening in dreams, maybe we can find out in what's happening in states like the ones where people say that they can't explain themselves, but we can create technologies that can help them explain that to the rest of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you heard this week news of Jeff Bezos investing into a technological startup that is working on, you know, immortality and age reversal research. So I think slowly things are getting there through technology. And that's the reason I said initially, is this not only a medical science, but one need to be a right mix of medical science with technology and with spiritual, you know, acceptance of the spiritual too, and really find out what is behind all these things.
Absolutely. I think we're in such beginning stages. And I just want to point out, you know, I think we're in a stage where we just need to figure out, is there something even there? And if you talk to different people from different cultures, I mean, you talk about samadhi and all the other terminology that used in Hinduism, but you have to realize the experience we have together is a human experience. It doesn't matter if you're born Muslim or born Hindu or born Christian or something. These are things that we have done as a culture. We've put them on. We've created languages, and we've created things that we count and recount and tell our children and grow them in a certain way. But definitively, we're all human. And so just proving that there is something beyond life, something between life and death, I think that itself is a huge step, and that's probably the frontier where we are in. So I may not have answered your whole question about samadhi, but I think that's like 4 or 5 steps ahead already.
So here is one question from one of the person here. That what are your thoughts on Brahma Mudra between 3:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. time period, and any best utilization of that time?
You know, unfortunately, I don't know if I completely understand the question. I think what you're asking is, I'm not entirely sure what Brahma Mudra is. It seems more of a Hinduism related question. I think you're asking, is there any utility to that time period? And I can tell you that I don't know what the significance of that time period is in Hinduism, but in the neuroscience world, there is a significance to the time period between 4 to 6 a.m. If you look in your biology, if you look in your hormones, there is a hormone called cortisol. And this hormone is the way that your body knows about stress. For example, when I'm talking to you, I'm stressed a little bit, so my cortisol level is higher. You're just listening, so your cortisol level may not be as higher. If you see a lion, it may go higher. Essentially, this hormone is a response of your body to stress. And between the hours of 4 to 6 a.m., this is the time when this hormone is the highest in your body. It's thought to be the way that your body awakens and comes into the natural world after sleep. Without this hormone, you would just stay sleeping forever. So again, I don't know what the significance is to the topic that you've pursued, but I know that without it, maybe natural life as you know it may not have been possible without that time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think so. It was called Brahma Muhurta, or timing that they call it. I saw it somewhere on the Hindu scripts where it's like it's a very good time to pray. That's the Brahma Muhurta. So that's what I was referring to.
Yeah, and I undoubtedly think people think it's a really good time to exercise and do other activities because of this level makes you more alert, more awake. It's the one time in your life where you're emerging from deep sleep back into awareness, and so I can totally see some parallels being drawn there for prayer as well. Thanks for your question.
The further question to that is, you mean that between 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. is a time when particular hormones secrete specifically this hormone secretes some kind of an acid that makes it happen, like the stress level to go down? Or
it actually makes your stress level goes up because when you're in deep sleep, you're not stressed. You're just laying there floating. You don't really care. But to bring you back to life, to bring you back to awareness, you need a little bit of stress involved. So this hormone makes your stress level goes up, but in your stress, you're more awake, right? And many of you, when you study for exams, you're more awake. You can retain information. You can think clearly. You can memorize the whole book. But when you're not stressed, when the exam is like 2-3 months away, then you get lazy. And so stress is very important. It makes us feel alive. And so, yeah, if it's prayer, if it's exercise, if it's whatever, I imagine that during that time, it's probably going to be better served anyway.
okay. So here is another question. Is saying that ISKCON community is engaged in Krishna devotion, and I got mental peace when I chant Lord Krishna. It's so. Can you please talk something about it? That So in short, the question is: if I'm chanting a God's name, I feel more peaceful. Does it have any relationship with brain functions or anything?
I think there's two questions there. I read this question very interestingly because chanting itself trains your brain in a very, very specific way. And then there's the other question of the actual name of Lord Krishna or Jesus Christ or whoever you want to call the name of. And when you think of somebody, right? Let's say you think of some name. Let's say I say for you, Uncle, I say Pramod Uncle. Everything about my experience with you is brought up in my brain. All the memories I have with you, every communication we have together, even though I may not consciously remember it, everything related to you comes up. Where you live, how you dress, how old you are, what you wear, your family, everything around you will come into my brain. And so when you say a name that you have associated with somebody who's from a different realm, whether it's Krishna or Jesus Christ or Buddha or any of the spiritual masters or your own guru or whoever, your brain brings up all of the ideas and the feelings and everything associated with that individual or that deity. So just the act of saying Lord Krishna or saying, Hare Krishna or whatever, that itself puts your entire mind in a context of saying to your body and your mind and your soul that I'm preparing for something better or something more devotional, something more spiritual. On top of that, if you keep repeating the name, it actually makes the rest of your brain kind of quiet down. If you think of an electric circuit, right? In your house, you have many electric circuits. You have your lights, you have your fan, you have your TV. And there's sometimes you can think there's some switches and you can turn them on and off, right? If you keep turning the same thing on and off and on and off and on and off, what happens is more and more of your attention goes to that one thing. So if you keep turning your light on and on and on and off, your TV doesn't get enough electricity, your computer doesn't get enough electricity, all that electricity starts to get diverted into the circuit that makes the light turn on and off. And it's the same with your brain. Your brain has very limited attention span. It can only pay attention to one thing at a time. As most of you, if you listen to TED Talks or anywhere, there was this big myth about multitasking in the 19th century. People are all up to like, I can do 4 tasks at a time or things like that. It's a complete myth. Your brain can only focus on one thing at a time. And by saying Lord Krishna or Hare Krishna over and over and over again, what you're doing is you're bringing up all the memories and spirituality and conditions and people associated with that name. And you're feeding more and more and more attention to that one particular circuit in your brain and quieting all the others. And in essence, this is sometimes what people describe as having a spiritual experience.
So next question is, for life and death, brain is more important or heart is more important? And which part of a brain is mainly responsible for the life and death? So 2 questions.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I touched on it a little bit. I'm a neuroscientist. I'm a teacher, neurosurgeon, neurologist, whatever you want to call us. We are obviously very biased. Right? If you talk to the cardiologist, he will think the heart is the greatest thing in the world. For us, it's the brain, right? But it's not just that we're biased. We now have objective data, right? And no matter what you think, if you can prove it, it's even better. And now we have proved it. Your brain is single-handedly responsible for what you think of as life. And I'm not talking about just breathing and moving like a little cockroach or an ant or something. I'm talking about what you are calling life. The experience of life, the communication, what we are together here in this moment, that's life. Your brain is the only thing responsible for that. Inside the brain, where it is. So, there's this whole journey in literature and medicine that starts even before people knew about writing or speech or anything, where people were like, what is the seat of the conscious? What is the thing that makes us alive? People, eventually said that, it was somewhere in the body. Then they said it was somewhere in the brain. And then they were going to keep going narrower and narrower and narrower and finding that one little spot that will be responsible for life and death and everything possible. But what you have to realize is it's not the brain, right? Because if you look at a dead person's brain and if you weigh it in terms of grams, it actually weighs the exact same as when the person was alive. There's no structural difference. Nothing really changed. Nothing just disappeared out of thin air. So what the difference is how one person talks to another, how one little cell in your brain talks to another, and that connection, that circuitry, that flow of information is what we call life. So many people will say to you that there's an area in your brain called the reticular activating system and the thalamus, and these 2 areas will, without them, you're not conscious, and with them arise all consciousness that is ever known to mankind. From all the hundreds and millions of years ago that we have survived on this planet to now, every single person who's conscious has this area in the brain called the reticular activating system and the thalamus. But if you just have them, you don't have anything. You need memories, you need emotions, you need feelings, which are in other areas of your brain. You need your hands and your legs, which move from other areas of your brain. You need your heartbeat that's controlled from other areas of your brain. So it's really the entirety of the brain and how it comes together that makes a difference. It's really like saying, if you look at the screen of New York, right? The skyscrapers of New York. Recently, we had this very traumatic event of September 11. And people looked at the screen and you see there that there's several buildings and there's several bricks that make those buildings. If I take one brick and I move it from New York to Bombay, have I moved the screen? And I haven't. If I take all the bricks in that place and move them, I still haven't. It's how the bricks come together to build those buildings, the buildings coming together to build that skyline. That's what we call the New York skyline. And it's the same way that we call life. It's not that you could just take somebody's thalamus and put it over there and the life moves over there. It's how your whole brain communicates and talks to each other. That's what creates life. And that's the difference between life and death, because in death, those connections don't happen.
Excellent. Thanks. So here's the next question. What is the effect of sound frequencies on a brain? Does it react differently from different frequencies?
Yeah, there's a huge literature on this topic. There's definitely different effects of different sound frequencies. You can think of your ear as a piano. Right? Every time you hear something, a little key in your ear is pressed down, like a little key in the piano. When I'm talking and over the time period of talking, it's like pushing multiple keys in the piano, and then that creates the whole song and you hear the song. But each key, each vibration, each frequency is different. In fact, it's so different that this whole literature was created from Hollywood. When they used to create sound effects for silent films, they wanted you to experience something. And they created specific frequencies and specific noises. So like when Mickey Mouse is hitting something, you see a thump, or he's playing something, you see like a different sound or different frequency. And a lot of literature came out saying that, yeah, different sounds make you react a different way. And initially this was done by Walt Disney and others to make you feel happier so that their movies would sell more. And that's why we get very happy when we see Mickey Mouse or other cartoons. But now we're getting to a point where we're not just looking at the individual sounds and the small frequencies that are very easy to see. You can play the same like bippity bop 40 times. But now we're looking at very complex frequencies like the mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra, or just this talk that we're having, and what that does to our brain. So stay tuned, more to come.
Thanks. So the next question. How we can explain soul in neuroscience?
Yeah, I think I alluded to this one earlier too. Soul, or what you think of as soul, is life that is not biological. To put simply, I think when you just throw terms out there, it's very hard for people to communicate. Every term, every word that you use must be very, very defined for us to have an answer to it. And that's how science works, right? It's different to say like, I can't even think of an example, but soul is very different. It means something different to me than it means to somebody in some other religion, than somebody like a soul of a cat is very different than a soul of a human being. So if you define soul in a way that your soul is the life that you experience that is not biological, and that is what I've tried to tell you or explain to you here, that what is between life and death is that type of life, is what we're trying to get at, is what your soul experiences when your brain is not having enough activity. So how can I define it in the neuroscience context? That's how I define it. Basically, if I take all the brain power, all the neurons, all the everything that makes up your brain and put it to the side, what's left is a soul. And as I've tried to explain or argue here, that I think that there is something left. Many people in science think that there would be nothing left. If you get rid of the brain, then there's nothing. You're just dead. You're just a pile, just like any bacteria or the rock that you're sitting on. But newer and newer technologies are saying that when the brain quietens, to a level seen in coma, when the brain stops thinking, when the brain activity goes so low, there is still something there. And that is essentially what you are calling soul, and I'm calling a life between life and death.
Thanks. So the next question, how to get rid of PTSD? I don't know what's
Yeah, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'm sorry if you are experiencing this because of some traumatic event, or if you know somebody who is. It really just has to do with how your brain thinks, you know. So going back, let's talk about the exam situation, right? When you are studying for your exam, you'd find that if you're cramming on the night before the exam, you may be able to remember things very, very detailed, very, very clearly for a few hours. And then you'll forget it right after the exam. So what happens? You know, you try the same thing 2 months before the exam, and you won't be able to do that. What happens when the exam is right there, and you have to study today in order to pass tomorrow and then forget about it the next day after? Your brain, all the areas of your brain start to focus. And going back, your brain can only focus on one thing at a time. Your attention is finite. There's no such thing as multitasking. You can only do one task at a time. And when, unfortunately, you experience a trauma, like rape or military war, or somebody mugging you on the street, or a loved one dying, all your attention, all your focus, everything in your brain goes around and centers around this particular event. You start to be present in that event more than you've ever been present. You start to remember the smells, the sights, everything you touched, what people were doing to you, how you felt at that time. Everything becomes hyper aroused, hyper focused. And you remember it very, very well. But next day, you have to survive. This unfortunate thing happened to you, but next day you have to get up and you have to go to work, or you have to do something else. You have to stay in society. You have to face your family. And your brain starts to forget or tries to forget. PTSD is when years later or months later, you start to, you're trying to forget, but these things just come up. Your memories come up. Some smell that you may have smelled at that particular time, you smell again, and the whole experience comes up. So for example, when people go to war, they hear lots of loud sounds and bullets and bombs and explosions, and they come home and they try to forget this. They try to forget that they were almost dead or they killed a lot of people. And then they will hear their pressure cooker go off. And just that sound being linked to something similar that they experienced in that event is what causes the PTSD. So what can you do? Unfortunately, you can't get rid of every single sound there is. But it's a training. It's training yourself to say that you're okay. And saying to yourself over and over again that you're okay, you're not in that space. That event has happened and it's in your past. And anything that may come up in you that relates to that event, you just experience. Like the pressure cooker is going off and you say to yourself that it sounds like the bombs, it sounds like the explosions, it sounds like all these terrible things that happened to me or terrible things that I did to somebody. But right now, it's just a pressure cooker and it's just going off. And over time, you retrain your brain over and over again. And really, it's shown to help some people overcome PTSD. But it's a hard thing to do, for sure.
So there's one more question here. Life is here and now. Is that what all philosophy says? So either it is or not. Either you are alive or you're dead. The question is, can there be something in between really?
Yeah, it's a question, as I said to you, it was for years. the Greeks thought about it. I'm sure people before the Greeks thought about it, but they just didn't write it down because they didn't have language. And so what is between life and death? And I guess before you can answer that, you have to really, really see, can there be something between life and death? I think I've tried to tell you, or I've tried to tell you my opinion of it, at least. And the latest in medical and technological standards that says that there is something there. Now, the meditation masters have told us this for a very long time, right? The Buddha, he lived like 2,000-3,000 years ago. Probably Krishna, and I know Krishna in his Bhagavad Gita has told us this. Jesus Christ has told us this. Many, many other meditation masters have told us this, that there is something where they are not fully alive and they're not fully dead. It really depends on how you define what life is, right? If you think of Krishna as one person, as one human, as one being that was there, maybe on the battlefield when Arjuna asked him, like, show me God, and you think of Krishna as the one person with 2 hands, 2 legs, and 1 brain standing there, then of course there's nothing between life and death, right? But when Arjuna asks him that question, he transforms into something different. He transforms, and Arjuna says it was as if like seeing the light of 1,000 suns, right? It was different. You can't have the light of 1,000 suns coming from your body, right? The sun is so big. How can you have it coming from your body? So what I'm trying to get at is, I don't, let's say I don't know what there is, but there's evidence from religion, from spirituality, from all these masters that if you choose to trust, they have said for years and years and years that there is something there. And just very recently, maybe in the last 20 years or so, we're uncovering technologies that show us that when people are not alive, when they're just lying in my ICU, but they're not yet completely dead, they are in a state and there is something there. So to answer your question directly, can there be something in between? Yes, there can, and it's exciting time to find out what exactly there is in between.
Nice. So the next question is, can our neurons can be trained at any age? Is age affect the efficiency of neurons?
Age does affect the efficiency of neurons. There's a reason why you today cannot learn Chinese as well as if you had taught it to your son when they were 2 years old. And that reason is called neuroplasticity. It's your ability to learn. It's your ability to do anything. It's your ability to be alive and be free and to learn new concepts. But you can be trained at any age. It just takes longer. So it's not that you cannot learn a new language. You cannot learn to sing or play the piano or do something else. It just will take a little longer. Because, as I mentioned to you, everything about you is the connection between one cell to another cell. When you are young, especially when you're in the fetus, in your mom's belly, all those connections are still forming. And they form all the way until you're about 13 to 16 years old. In that period of time, between birth to 13 to 16 years old, you hear things, you see things, you read things, you go to school, and all of that time, the connections are forming at a very, very, very rapid rate. And so it's easier to learn, it's easier to train. However, even when you're 90, we have evidence that those connections are still forming. They may be forming maybe at like one time when in the child you're forming 1,000 of them at the same period, but they're still forming. So yes, you can be trained at any age, but it will be difficult for sure.
And here is another question. Any thought on a person dies and other life is born at the same time? Is it the same soul reborn at the same as some culture believes?
So I don't know if I have evidence-based thoughts on it. I know I have thoughts on it because I've read a lot about it, and what you're really talking about is reincarnation. But as I mentioned to you, a lot of this is just coming to the front of neuroscience and the front of actual rigorous study. Reincarnation is still a matter of philosophy. It's still in the realm where we're not able to really study it. So I don't know if it's at the same time that my patient dies. I see him die in front of me. I know the exact time when he dies, and we call it the time of death. But how can I possibly know if some other life form, was created at that exact same time? Unless I measure every single life form. And I'm not talking about every single human. I'm talking, if you truly believe in reincarnation, it's that life is life. It just takes on this body that you're in. So it could be a butterfly, it could be a bacteria, it could be a virus, it could be an elephant, it could be another human. How can I possibly measure that? The answer is not there yet, but the people 100 years ago thought you could not measure what's between life and death. And so I have thoughts on it, but I will spare you those thoughts because we're here to talk about neuroscience and not what my thoughts are. So.
Right. So there's the next question is following upon the PTSD question. How does plasticity affect the reactions that people have to travel events that triggers the traumatic memories?
Plasticity is your way to heal from those events. Basically, anytime you learn something or anytime you experience something, your brain creates a new connection. Right? If I told you today to learn that 2 + 2 is 5, and I ask you 10 minutes later, hey, what was 2 + 2 that I said? And you say 5, your brain has created a new connection. Okay. Basically, when that happens in a traumatic event, as I mentioned already, there's a lot of connections being created rapidly, one after the other. And not all of them are very healthy. When you are later trying to think about those events, so I'll take the pressure cooker example again. When that pressure cooker goes off, your brain has a tendency to go through all those connections one more time and think of the bomb, think of you almost dying, think of all the gunshots and the fire and losing your leg and all the other experiences that happen. But when you take a moment, when you sit in silence, when you really look at that pressure cooker and say, hey, it's just a pressure cooker and it's just making my food for today. Now you've created a new connection. Instead of going down the path of the pressure cooker goes off and I go down this path of this very bad traumatic experience, now I created a new connection that says my pressure cooker went off and my food is created and I'm safe and I'm going to eat again. And that creation of a new connection, that's what neuroplasticity is. That's all.
Okay, excellent. Thanks. So here is another question. We see these videos that little child is able to play piano like a professional. Does that mean maestro is reborn with same skill?
Yeah, possibly. As I mentioned, the reincarnation topic is still a matter of philosophy, so I won't touch on it too much because, you try to present something evidence-based. You try to present something that we all know and agree on is true. Philosophy is not like that. Philosophy is somebody says one thing and somebody else says another. So I have my thoughts on it, but it's possible. The other possibility, though, which may be more interesting, is I told you already that when you're a baby and you're a fetus, your brain is like a clean slate. It's like a whiteboard. It has nothing on it. And when you start to grow, your connections start to form. And when you go to school, you learn 7 different subjects. You come home, you learn one language, maybe your parents speak one language, your grandma speaks another language, your home language, your cultural language. Maybe you're learning how to work on toys. Maybe you're watching TV and learning some cartoons. There's so much going on around you as a baby, right? So What if you take that same baby and you only give it one thing? For example, you don't send him to school, you don't teach him a language, you don't do anything, you don't show him the TV, you don't show him any toys. All you do is play him the piano once. Your brain wants to create new connections. It wants to create new connections at a very rapid pace when you're a baby. And so if it doesn't get all of that stimulation, what it's going to do is really listen to that piano, really listen, really look at the fingers moving on the keys, and immediately pick it up at a pace that is unheard of. And how do I know this? Because if you Google autism, some of you may know what autism is. Autism is when a child is unfortunately not able to be social or be normal in the normal sense that we think of. But there are specific children that become savants. And an autistic savant is somebody who can't talk, can't write, can't dance, can't talk, can't even look at you. They have a very difficult time in social interactions. Maybe they can't even move, they need a wheelchair, but they can draw like there's, the best drawing you could ever possibly see. There's actually a movie on this. It's a Hindi movie. Maybe you guys have seen it, by Amir Khan. What's the name? I forget, but it's this child who was thought to be autistic. Their parents sent him to boarding school. I think it's called Tare Zameen Par. Tare Zameen Par, if you have seen it. And the idea is the same. When we know from studies that their brains are so restricted that they cannot take in any information, but for some reason they're able to just pick up that one thing, whether it's drawing, whether it's a piano, whether it's something else. And so when they're a baby and they grow, they're presented with all of these things, but they can only pick up one part of it, and then their brain becomes super good at that one part. And so maybe after scanning all these brains and doing all the things that we do to these maestros, that's what we have discovered, that maybe this is what's happening to make a child a maestro. But again, can I say that it's not reincarnation? I can't, because it's a matter of philosophy. Right?
Excellent. So, to this question again, my personal question is, do you mean that the lesser connections the brain has, you can be more productive in what you're doing it because the brain is more focused?
I can be more what? You cut off a little bit, sorry.
And if the brain has less connections, does that mean that the brain would be more productive in what you're doing?
That's correct. Yeah. So it's not the number of connections that matter. In fact, if you have less connections, then you may not be as intelligent. As we see in children with disability, they have less connections, right? We all hear of people or children, unfortunately, some of you may even have children who unfortunately may not be able to learn, and special schools and have to raise, they don't have enough connections. But let's say you're a normal individual, like one of you have normal connections, you're grown up normally, but you quieten those connections. You kind of make them less. Then your focus becomes more, and the connections that you pay attention to, you send them into a circuit, like the Hare Ram, Hare Krishna question. You send them into a circuit that makes them better, that makes you better at learning whatever you're learning or doing whatever you're doing. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, excellent. So here's the next question, which is in Marathi. Luckily, you understand Marathi, so it should be good. Bhagavad Giteनुसार प्रकृती ही सत्व, रज व तम या 3 गुणांनी बद्ध आहे. सर्व काही प्रकृतीच्या या 3 गुणांनुसार सोबत होतात. या गुणानुसार मेंदूत कसा बदल होतो आणि प्रकृतीच्या या नियमात ढवळाढवळ करून मेंदूच्या कार्यात बदल करण्यासाठी औषधी उपयुक्त आहेत काय? Oh my God, this is too Marathi is like too polished.
त्यांनी विचारलं प्रकृतीत 3 गुण. I think you broke off again. 3 गुण कोणते गुण आहेत त्यांनी सांगितलं?
So I'll read little easier ways that, these are the 3 qualities, sattva, raja, and tama. How does that make change in your brain? Is the first question. Second is, would there any medicine would be helpful to, from that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. 3 गुण जे आपण म्हणतो, सत्व, रज, and tama, right? I think so. Everybody knows that there's a phrase called "the idle mind is the devil's workshop." Right? जेव्हा आपण काहीही विचार करत नाही, तेव्हा भरपूर असे विचार येतात जे आपल्याला डिस्ट्रॅक्ट करतात, जे आपण फोकसमध्ये नाही राहत. And that's, I think, what he's referring to as tamas, right? Or the state of laziness. Basically, you're just sitting around watching TV or doing something else. Whereas the sattvic stage, जसं मला माहिती आहे, you see the same person and you see him sitting in the same spot. The tamas person is just lazy, thinking about what to eat, what to do, what to drink, what TV to watch. The same person, the same spot, a sattvic person is very focused. It's very maybe meditating or thinking about something more deeper or a conversation. And if you look in the brains of people who are distracted and people who are focused on a task, and I'm not just making this up, there's actual studies that do this. What we do is the fMRI, Jimmy Maralo, you take people, you bring them into the fMRI scanner and you say, okay, just rest and do nothing. And you see all sorts of activity everywhere, very chaotic, very disorganized, everywhere in the brain. And then you in front of their eyes, you draw a plus sign. And you tell them, just focus on that plus sign for 20 minutes. And what you see in real time is all the activity becoming more organized. A lot of it becomes silent. A lot of it focuses on the plus sign, or where the brain equivalent would be, where we're presenting them that plus sign. And it becomes hyper-focused. So I don't, there's just different terms people use. People use sattva, rajas, tamas. We use resting state versus focus and concentration, memory, things like that. Different terms, but terms are just terms. As I mentioned, we're the ones who created the terms, right? We learned English, we learned Hindi, somebody else learned Arabic, somebody else learned Gujarati. So the terms are not important. What's important is that all of us are having this experience. And all of us are saying the same thing, whether it's the spiritual masters or the neuroscientists, we are saying the same things. And there is a difference between these 3 states. In terms of your tonics and the medications to go into more sattvic states, we know that your body influences your brain, and your brain influences the body. For thousands of years, we thought, okay, you have a brain, and the brain tells the body what to do. For example, the brain tells your arm how to move, and the body just moves the way the brain tells. But now we know that there's a gut-brain network, there's a microbiome network, there's all these networks in your body that the body will tell your brain what to do. And so if you eat the correct foods, like if you eat not spicy foods, if you eat, something healthy, something you like, it has the potential to send your brain into more pleasurable states, including more sattvic states. The reason that I will not say that any one tonic works is because it's as if saying, when you go into a store, I only create one t-shirt, and I say that this one t-shirt, you have to like, and you have to like, and you have to like it, and you have to like it, and everybody and everyone has to like the same t-shirt. It doesn't happen. When you go into a store, you see thousands of t-shirts because people have thousands of preferences. They like different things. The same thing with your body. Your body likes different foods. It's so individualized. It depends on what you grew up eating. For me, like dal bhat is my favorite thing in the world. And it's because my mom made it over and over again, right? For me when I was young. And so now I make it. And probably my child would have it too. But if you did not grow up in India, you grew up somewhere else, and maybe you like fish or chicken or something else. It's so individualized that I personally would not give too much about the tonics and all these other things that people claim. But I will say that your body is made to eat certain foods that are healthy for it and will send your brain into healthier states of being.
So in that context, there's a next question, and this is that what is the best diet or supplement to keep our nervous system healthy?
Yeah, there's something called the Mediterranean DASH diet. And after lots and lots and lots of research, they literally looked at whether you eat an avocado a day to a banana a day to a pickle a day. Like they looked at so many things, and they created finally this diet called the Mediterranean DASH diet. And what it did was it improved your risk to have a heart attack. So you will have low risk to have heart attack. You have low risk to have diabetes. You will have low risk to have liver failure. It improved your life or your body in every single organ. And it's a huge thing. It's still available. It's called the Mediterranean DASH diet. You can just Google it. But every single study they did with that diet and looking at the brain function said there was no difference. And again, it goes back to the point where your body is your body. It's meant to keep you alive, but that's not who you are. You're not just your body. So there's lots of diets and lots of fads and lots of this and lots of that. They can make you live longer, yes, because they will nourish your cells better. They can lower your risk of heart disease. They can lower your risk of diabetes. But for your brain is extraordinarily unique. And the food that it wants is very unique. It's very intrinsic to you. You cannot study this in a population. It just doesn't work. It's very, very unique to you. When you think of one food that you like, let's say you like gulab jamun, and one food that you absolutely hate, let's say Karela, right? Karela may be good for you. It may be good for you for your digestive system, for your heart, for your blood, for everything, but you don't like it. And there's a reason why. So people will say, eat all the Karela, eat all the broccoli, eat all the whatever. And yeah, for your body, it's healthy. For the child that's growing, it's healthy, but it may not be as healthy for your brain. Your brain is telling you that it does not like this food for a particular reason. You going and eating more and more and more of it is not the best way to live for your brain.
So is there a way that you can identify what would be an individual right diet for an individual, like what the brain requires and what the body requires might be the two different things. So which one is more important?
Yeah, exactly. You know, your brain will like all the French fries that it wants to eat and ice cream, but you know, at some point, until well, actually, the third talk that I will give is about becoming visually immortal. So, but until that time happens, your brain is stuck inside a body, so you have to take care of your body as well. So.
True. So here, Dr. Chopre is asking that Dr. Amit, I would like to invite you to talk the members of Indian Society of Training and Development on the same topic. Would you be available for that, please?
Sure, no problem. You can reach me anywhere. As I mentioned, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter quite often. But if you don't want those, I think.
So I'll connect, Dr. Chopra. I'll connect with this, and then.
Yes, Pramod. Yeah, thanks so much.
I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, he whenever I talk to him, he's in the late night emergencies. So today, right now, it's like 3 hours behind us. So he woke up early morning because I think he come in the morning 5 o'clock, 6 a.m. So you just have to find out the right timing, correct timings that suit both of you.
Absolutely.
I got that. Yeah.
So the next one is like autism, is there any proven theory explaining our mental health and behavior? Like, oh, I cannot read this.
Narcissistic personalities, bipolar disorders. Yeah. So I hope there's one thing you got from this talk. I mean, you may not believe I think somebody was did not believe that there could be states between life and death or whatever. So I hope there's one thing I communicated to you, and that is that everything comes from your brain, right? Every single thing you experience comes from your brain. That means that every single thing anyone has ever experienced or is ever experiencing also comes from your brain. So if you see and if you go to the psychiatric ward and you see crazy people, like literally crazy people, right? You may see it in the movies, the psych wards and stuff. First of all, let me tell you that the movies obviously exaggerated, but there is some reality to it. In the psych ward, what they call crazy people are really out there. They see reality completely differently. They actually see right now, they would see 4 people on camera telling them to do 4 different things. They'll hear voices when they're not there. You know, there's so many different things that are happening. But if you go with the theory that everything anyone can ever possibly experience comes from the brain, then all those 4 people and the hearing and the thoughts and all this crazy stuff is happening in your brain. And so, yes, we do have theories of narcissistic personalities and bipolar disorders and schizophrenia and all of these things. But all knowledge, in my opinion, goes from philosophy to psychology to neuroscience. And, you know, philosophy is philosophy, like religion is a philosophy, you know, psychology, like it goes and makes, like, okay, now we termed it something. So philosophy is just things exist. Psychology is, okay, now we termed it bipolar. We don't really know what that means. We don't know what schizophrenia means, but it's like a term. But the jump between psychology to neuroscience happens when we create technology, we create understanding, we basically want to answer questions. We create questions and want to answer them, and then it becomes the realm of neuroscience. And all of these things, narcissism, bipolar, ADHD, autism, all of these kind of things are right in between. They used to be psychology and treated with psychiatric therapy. Like, you know, some people may have heard about brain shocks, electroconvulsion, all of those kind of things where you just shock a person. I mean, we know that that is not only very harmful, it's very torturous, and it doesn't accomplish anything. That's the realm of psychology that I'm talking about. But all of the things that you mentioned are coming towards the realm of neuroscience. Are they there completely? Not really. But in a few years, they will be. So yeah, there will be proven theories for all of these things very soon, hopefully.
So is the last
and sorry, just to cut you off, the reason that this matters, the reason it matters to go from philosophy to psychology to neuroscience is because you can change something. And many people don't understand that. People are so happy blindly following. Like, blind faith is such a huge problem. If you see it in the Middle East, you see it in all types of religions, you see it everywhere, where everyone's just happy that somebody mentioned something at some point and it's a philosophy that they had, and you just follow it. But the reason it's important to go from philosophy and ask those questions, to really define what's happening, to go into the realms of psychology and eventually to neuroscience, is because you can understand it on a much deeper level, and you can change something. You can be there. You can help somebody. You can help yourself. You can create things. You can think about spirituality in a whole different context. And that's why we do this. That's why we create theories. It's not like we're just sitting around doing nothing to do. Instead of watching Netflix, you're just like, okay, let's scan somebody's brain. But when we do understand what's happening in bipolar disorder, we'll be able to make treatments and help people that suffer from it. Maybe they won't have to spend their life in a psychiatric ward. Already today, we are creating treatments where it's 1 pill a day today, and people can live normal lives. Whereas just 20, 30 years ago, they would have spent 50 to 60 years of their life locked in a psychiatric ward. And now 1 pill a day will make them live out their entire lives normally. That's why theories matter. That's why this topic matters.
Thanks. So, is the last question. Are there any tests to prove this kind of mental disease, like proper medical evaluations?
There are a lot of tests. I think all we do is test. But many people criticize us, especially in neurology and neuroscience, that all you guys do is test. You don't do anything about it. You diagnose us with all these conditions, and nothing happens. Like, for example, Alzheimer's. You tell me I have Alzheimer's, I'm losing my memory, and you can't do anything about it. You can't bring back my memory. So we get criticized a lot about just testing. But again, we're in our infancy. We're where your cardiologist was like 100 years ago. Because the heart is not that complicated an organ. The brain is extremely complicated, so it takes time. But yes, there are tests. If you would like a proper medical evaluation, we have obviously consulting services. I'm happy to consult for you if you want mine. But there are several different consulting services, and this is in no way an endorsement or anything for me. It's just there are a host of tests that you can do, and there's ways to diagnose as well as treat some of these conditions that are coming up.
Thanks a lot. So this was the last question, and I would conclude this session. It's already 1.5 hours. We have scheduled total 3 sessions. The next session is on September 19th, next Sunday, which is very important. And please circulate in your friends and community. Today, I didn't realize that because of this is the time in India, especially is in Ganpati Aarti time, and there's a season, so most of the people would be busy in that. But next Sunday is when probably Ganesh Chaturthi would be finished. The topic is a mask, vaccine, and the human brain. Very important topic. Talk to your friends, try to join, take an advantage of such an extremely knowledgeable someone who has spent all his years in researching on the most complex topic. Take an advantage of these things, and I would say thanks Amit, thanks Dr. Amit for finding a time to share your knowledge with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, everybody, and I hope you have a good weekend.
Yeah, we'll connect again on next Sunday same time, and you guys can disconnect. I'll stay here until the last person moves out from here. Thanks everyone for joining us.